Welcome everyone to this Privacy Rules Privacy Espresso. My name is Alessandro Di Mattia, Legal and Executive Officer at Privacy Rules. And today I'm pleased to be joined by our guest speaker, that is Muneeb Imran Shaikh, Information Security and Privacy Consultant. And the topic of today that we are going to address is very practical, because we are going to speak about how to implement a privacy and data protection plan respecting different privacy regulation, starting from the main one for our guest speaker of today. So Muneeb, thank you very much for being with us. And I would like to start with a brief overview, on your experience and the main jurisdiction you have to deal with in your daily activity, that I suppose is the one of Saudi Arabia.
Pleasure to be on your show. I have been working as a data privacy manager. As we speak for the jurisdiction is Saudi laws over here, and it's not just the privacy, the personal data protection law, but there are other laws as well that need to be taken care of when you are serving the financial sector, and there are other regulations as well. So which need to be taken care of when you are building a privacy program. So over here right now in Saudi Arabia, we have one body that is looking after the entire data management and the entire operations related to data. It's a body called Sadaya, which has certain regulations, and they are the ones who are responsible for spelling out the regulations vis-a-vis data privacy as well. So if I speak about Saudi Arabia particularly, basically they have regulations coming from a specific sector. I'll give you an example. So if you are operating in the financial sector, so the regulations are largely coming from the Saudi Central Bank, which is basically sending out the cybersecurity framework which they have, and then you need to comply with the cybersecurity framework. Then there is a National Cybersecurity Authority, which has its own framework vis-a-vis cybersecurity that is applicable across different industries. And then you have Sadaya, which is specific to the data management part. They have their own regulations. So all these three regulations have convergences and divergences amongst them, and they all need to be taken care of. Like even for the personal data protection, there are certain parts which are taken from National Cybersecurity Authority. So you have to keep these factors into consideration when you are developing a program for the compliance.
Thanks a lot for this, quick introduction, Muneeb. And it's already complex because, as you perfectly say, there are more rules and regulation to be considered already within the Saudi system. But is there any regulation also from, for example, other countries that you have to consider other than the one of Saudi?
You see, it depends on the kind of business that you are engaged into. Like, I mean, if you are operating as some kind of an airline, which does business, or a bank that has that has operations outside Saudi Arabia as well. Yes, for them to comply with the international laws and to comply with regulations like GDPR becomes far more important. But for an organization like that of ours, or organizations which do not really have their presence outside Saudi Arabia, the regulatory obligations are relatively lesser in comparison to the organizations that have their operations outside Saudi Arabia, or who are trying to serve the markets outside Saudi Arabia as well.
Perfect. That's very interesting. And speaking about this and the fact that you have to deal with either inside the specific country, you have to deal with different regulations. My next question for you, and given your experience, would be, how do you deal with different regulations? How do you comply with many of them? How do you work? What's your process in order to be sure that you comply with all of them?
So, well, it's a very challenging process and also a very interesting one. I'll tell you what is the approach that I usually take in order to deal with all these regulations. That first and first, you have to understand these regulations in a very intricate manner. You have to understand their intricacies. You have to understand their overlappings. So sometimes these regulations or the laws have certain parts that overlap each other. They have their convergences. So you have to find out those areas that converge between each other. and you have to note that down. And then there are certain requirements that are specific to that law, that are specific to the field that you are operating in. So you need to figure out those things as well, and then you need to make sure that you address them into your program as well. So this is how you can basically develop a program or a roadmap that looks after the requirements for all the regulations that are incumbent upon your organization, and also the laws that are incumbent upon your organization. One more aspect that I often consider is the international best practices and the standards that often come in the shape of ISO standards, like ISO 27701 Privacy Information Management System is one of the standard that we have that is increasingly getting employed across the globe, and it provides a common understanding between different organizations across different countries to have a common understanding of the privacy framework within their setup. So factoring in all these things like the international best practices and standards, the regulatory requirements, and the laws. And again, when I'm saying laws and the regulations, you have to understand that what are the areas where they converge and what are the exclusive requirements for those laws and regulations. So you have to factor in all those requirements. You have to club them into a single program and make sure that you then develop a roadmap for for complying with those requirements.
Wonderful, Muneeb. That was extremely practical and extremely interesting. So thanks a lot for sharing, your experience and your views with us. And I think that it's also useful because regulation like the ISO are like international ones. So ones that once applied can be used also for a variety of jurisdictions. So very, very useful and a relevant one to know. I think we are running out of our time, so I would like to thank you very much for finding the time and for being with us today, and for your, of course, very clear explanation. I would like to thank our listeners for being with us and following the Privacy Espresso of today, inviting them all to following also the next one next week. Thanks a lot, and see you very, very soon again.
Pleasure.